Welcome to the Cut. I'm Craig Shelton. I'm your host, and this is UTN 43.8, which means you're in the right place. Tonight in studio, we got my man Will Lyles from HMW. Will, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Richard Walker in studio. How you doing tonight?
Doing good as always.
And we have Mantal Te'ao's girlfriend in studio tonight.
Right here.
Right there. How you doing, ma'am? Good. Nice hair. No doubt. We get it started with Mantal Te'ao tonight. If you haven't been paying attention and you wonder why we suddenly went into this collective effort of pantomime with me and my man Richard over here, it's because the biggest story in sports, and it's a story that I really don't know why it's a story, but we'll talk about it nevertheless. He was a guy that was in the spotlight just a couple of weeks back, Mantal Te'ao, inside linebacker from Notre Dame. Up for the Heisman Trophy was obviously Johnny Manziel from Texas A&M. Took that Heisman Trophy home, making it a really, really good inaugural season into the SEC for Kevin Sumlin and the Texas A&M Aggies. But this story is broken all over the place. Everybody's talking about it. It's the girlfriend that didn't exist. Mantal Te'ao, was he the victim of a horrible hoax? This is a situation where he's actually involved with it and just kind of took advantage of the situation and just kind of took the media for a little ride along the way. Guys, before we get into it, and you creeping me out over there.
I have to calm Miss Tail down. I mean, she's a little, you talking about her man, man. You put a man on
your hands
blast.
off that white woman, you're going to go to jail. All right. It's still America. You ain't hire no black coaches this week. You don't want to
that's a new shade of white. That's clear.
Clear. That's like Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And before we get going into this, I want to commend you on that purple shirt. No doubt.
Thank you.
Matter of fact, we shining with shirts tonight on this.
Right.
Think about it. Let's do this. Will and Richard, before we even get into this, and I know you guys got a lot to say about this topic.
Yeah.
Here's my deal with the Mantal Te'ao situation. It shouldn't be a story, folks. Sports is dominated by men. And we're going to talk about men dominating sports tonight, because I got a question in a later segment about this male-dominated industry I want you folks to answer. But when you think about a culture that's dominated by us, we, the testosterone-filled men of this earth, but we gossip like little women. In fact, I was raised by women, strong sisters. I don't ever recall them gossiping the way that we gossip when it comes to sports. A story about a 20-something-year-old college kid getting duped over an imaginary girlfriend, it should not be of interest to us, but we've been sucked into it. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Now, this is the question, folks, and what we do on the show, we put these questions out on these topics on Facebook and on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at CraigHMW, on Facebook at CraigHMW Shelton. And I may have said that Twitter handle wrong, but it's Craig Shelton HMW if I did. Here's the question we put out. If the allegations surrounding Mantal Te'ao and his alleged deceased girlfriend are proven to be fabricated by Te'ao with deceitful intent, should NFL teams be concerned about the character of Te'ao? Now, this is a two-part question. I won't even ask you the second part of it yet. We can have fun with all the silly stuff about this, but for Mantal Te'ao, this is going to be about dollars and cents when we get to the 2013 draft. Will Lyles.
Well, I really don't feel that it will affect his draft status as much. Alabama already took care of that.
Explain for the listeners. I know what you mean, but explain.
Basically, I feel that the Alabama game showed deficiencies in his game to play against an NFL caliber offensive line, which is something he didn't have to play against all season long. Mm-hmm. And when he reached Alabama, they took him to the woodshed. So everyone's looking at that film right now. I think that has more of an effect on his draft status than this fake hoax girlfriend.
So you think people
issue.
are looking at the film from the national championship game where the entire Notre Dame team got beat up on? So if your defensive front four are being dominated by an Alabama front, which is practically an NFL front line, which means these guards and tackles are able to get to the second level and put pads on smaller linebackers, I just disagree. See, I disagree that there's a resume of Manti Te'o before that game. He's a pretty good football player. It's not like Alabama is the only team he's played in his years at Notre Dame that had NFL-level talent on the team. I just don't buy that particular point of the argument.
Yeah, personally, I feel that he got exposed. He got exposed. That was probably the best team in his 4 years at Notre Dame.
So that was all about Manti Te'o?
No, it wasn't just all about Manti Te'o, but he got dominated. The whole team got dominated, but he got dominated also.
Well, I saw him miss some tackles. I saw him make some tackles. He didn't have a good football game. The entire roster got dominated. I think what we do, people, I think we look for somebody to blame. I don't think there's a single story that we can have in life that what's the minister over at the big church over there used to be the Summit?
Osteen.
Joel Osteen. Yeah. Somebody called Joel Osteen a false prophet on Twitter the other day. We were talking football, and somebody made a Joel Osteen reference. You know, and my point I'm making, we find something wrong with everything. It's not a lot you can find wrong with the career of Manti Te'o.
I would say the career of Manti Te'o was bad. Let me tell you, this is why I say what I'm saying. They hyped him up so big when it came to the national stage, he did not perform.
The entire team
didn't perform. But the entire team didn't perform. But who was the face of that team? I
just can't buy that argument. I get your argument. Let me put it to you, and we're going to get to Richard. Let me put it to you in this turn. You are a guy that represent college athletes. You represent guys, you get kids ready to go from the high school level to the college level. Will, I know you. If Manti Te'o was one of your kids, let's say talk to these viewers on this show and put the spin on that game that you would have spin on it if he was one of your kids. Get ready.
Well, no, see, this is how I'm looking at it. You got Manti Te'o, you got Jarvis Jones, the two best linebacker prospects in the draft. You look at the body of work that Jarvis Jones had, which is very similar to Georgia. Which is very similar.
There's two linebackers in football. The best one is not coming out this year, but we don't have to go there yet.
Exactly. But we're talking about who's going to get picked first between those guys. We're talking about draft stock. That game hurt Te'o because when Jarvis Jones played against that same Alabama team, he outplayed him.
I agree in principle that game.
But we're talking about draft status between
that game will affect
those
his
people.
draft status more than what I asked on this question.
Right.
But where you went with it on the second level, we just have a disagreement on that. Yeah. Richard.
Well, I think kind of to piggyback off Will's point, I think the NFL draft is mostly a what have you done for me lately kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And those scouts are they're going to start with his most recent film, the end of his career. The last impression he left was that, I don't even know what you call that, performance against Alabama. I know what you call it. I don't think we can say that on here. But to your point, back to the original question as to whether or not this is going to impact his draft stock, I think it will. Because one of the things that NFL scouts, I think, are looking for now is they're looking to get away from these weird character guys with all these flaws in the traits.
No, that's fact. NFL teams that's don't like weird.
They are on a no more BS mindset. And so this guy brings this, if it's in fact true that he's involved,
it's too late, even if it's not true.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's not true, the fact of the matter is he's stupid. to even get caught up in the, he should get a special license for stupidity or something like that for you even being involved in this.
Well, I think back at 22.
Hey, Craig, at 22, would you have been in a relationship with somebody for 3 years that you never met? No, I don't think so. Nobody's that stupid.
I decline to speak on that.
Well, at least you'd have seen him in person, if that makes sense.
You have a point there.
So, I mean,
let's close it out. Go ahead.
Yeah, you add the character issues in addition to the fact that, the last impression of this guy we got was he was on his back most of the night against that Alabama offense. I say, yeah, it's going to impact his draft stock.
Okay, I disagree with both of these guys, and I think that's clear. We'll go ahead and go to Twitter and go to Facebook, and we'll go to our correspondent for our social media here on The Cut, Alicia Stewart, and see what they had to say.
Thank you, Craig. Here's the comments on Facebook and Twitter on Manti Te'o. Jesse Morris says, honestly, he's a kid from a small community in Hyde and probably was bored, lonely. Can we all not think of stupid things we did at 22 years old? It's just a lot easier to get the media involved in this digital age. If anything, ESPN and the media are just as much to blame. Wilman Jackson says, if he lying, I think he will get what's coming to him. If he got catfished, then I think they should make a crime and put people in jail for that. And no, Royce White doesn't impact me on this. I think the show. Chauncey Williams says, if this is true, I can't wait to see his Wonderlic score. Should be a negative something. On Twitter, at Lance Zerline says, I will be totally honest. They will start to get spooked about him being a weirdo. They like non-weird. At AJ The Real, ESPN Yahoo Radio says, doesn't seem like an issue NFL teams should worry about. They should worry about his play in the NC against a good comp. At David Nuno, ABC 13 sports broadcaster says, absolutely, NFL teams should be concerned. Royce White doesn't skew my view on T.O. Royce is dealing with mental illness. I feel for him, but he has handled it wrong. Thanks, Craig. This is UTN's The Cut.
Folks, welcome back to the show. It's The Cut. I'm Craig Shelton. I swear to you, it's The Cut. Just look right there. You can see it's The Cut. Angelo Lawford from HMW in studio. You see Angelo Lawford right here on UTN with the Soccer Report. And also Richard Walker joins us again for this segment. He completely screwed up the first segment, just talking crazy. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. With this invisible woman over there.
This is Mrs. Te'o, man. Show some respect,
Be
please.
good to the girl.
Okay.
Look, guys, an interesting week. Folks, want to invite you to follow me on Twitter at Craig Shelton HMW, on Facebook at Craig HMW Shelton. You can participate on the show by commenting on the questions that we post on Twitter and Facebook, and you'll hear them right here on the show. You'll see your comments, folks. Guys, look, like I said earlier, interesting week. Manti Te'o dominated it. But for a minute there, Lance Armstrong, he's about to win another race. He was about to win the media race this week if it wasn't for Manti Te'o and that ridiculous story. But after over a decade of lying, and let's face it, he lied. He came out clean and admitted it about using illegal drugs. This guy won 7 championships in a row, something you just don't do in cycling. He goes on this interview, does his thing with Oprah Thursday in Austin, Texas, and he comes clean. My deal with it, I'm not here to kill a guy. We're all sports fans, but to a man, all of us will swear we don't care about cycling. Yeah. I mean, that's the first sport that we'll say we don't care about. Yeah. We'll give boxing love over cycling. Golf gets love over cycling. But yet everybody has an opinion, because that's what we like to do. What is America great at? Fighting wars?
Oh, yeah.
We're pretty good at that.
We're pretty good.
Pretty good at making money. We're pretty good at building people up and tearing them down. And then to make ourselves feel good, we like to bring them back up.
Yep.
It's really not about you, sir, who I just broke down. It's about me feeling good about myself. So I'm not going to go out and kill this guy. But I do believe that this guy has an agenda. And it may be a noble agenda. It may be, you know what, I've lied to friends, I've hurt people. I want to give something back. I want my kid. I want to clean up my legacy because I got kids. And maybe it's a noble deal like that. Maybe he found God like they do in the penitentiary. You know? I don't know what his deal is, but what I'm not going to do is kill a guy. But I want to read something to you out of USA Today, Richard. Okay. After a year of attacking those who accused him of doping, Armstrong now must strike a delicate balance between competing goals, honesty, and protection. For Lance Armstrong, in your opinion, is this more about total honesty versus self-protection? Because I don't believe there's any room left for total honesty with this guy.
Yeah, and I think obviously it's more about self-protection, because along with self-protection becomes his ability to, if that's what he wants to do, be that spokesperson for whatever noble cause it is that he's going for. Obviously, there's some financial incentive to that with cleaning up your reputation from a public relations perspective. But in opposite of basically what everyone else is saying, I actually applaud the guy, because he did come forward on his own. He had no reason to, other than the obvious, try to clean up his reputation. But he could have just kept quiet and just kept this thing under the rug, and nothing else would have been said about it. It's not like he's still competitive. It's not like he's still involved in the tour. And let's face it, Lance is not just an athlete. He's a superstar. He's the reason why if it wasn't for Lance Armstrong, people like you and I would never say the words Tour de France.
Oh no, he's transcended.
Yeah, we didn't give a damn about Tour de France until Lance Armstrong.
We just know Lance. We don't know his rival. We don't know the second.
For a couple of years, I didn't even know it was Tour de France. I thought it was Tour de Lance. So, who cares? But to my point, and this is actually something that I made reference to in my article. What about the fact that the sports that he's involved in, just like the baseball players, they had to know something.
Oh, man,
where there's smoke, there's fire.
He had to be protected by the highest governing body in the sport.
And if you recall something else, it wasn't actually the Tour de France officials that caught him. It was the anti-doping agency that caught him. Same with baseball, with the Mitchell report coming out. Somebody snitched, from an external source and broke up their wonderful little Ponzi, pyramid scheme. So they didn't care about him doing dope. I think that, what he did, it definitely helped a lot of people. He was an inspirational factor, even though it was a lie. It was a good lie. And, to crucify him.
So you buy into the Robin Hood factor?
Well, I mean, to some degree, yeah. I mean, sometimes as Denzel said in Training Day, sometimes in order to catch a wolf, you have to be a wolf yourself.
I'm good with that. Let me move on with it to Angelo. Angelo, and to both you guys and to you folks at home, the question that we put out on Facebook and Twitter in this regard was Lance Armstrong. Here's a question: why in a white male-dominated media, and it clearly is, why was potentially the biggest story in 2013 lost to a black woman? Because a story this huge went to Oprah, who's not even a sports correspondent. She doesn't do sports. No, she's not exclusive to any particular genre. I mean, she normally lends herself to topics and formats that will be more attractive to the female audience. But I mean, you would think that Costas, Nance, somebody, anybody, you go to Oprah. Interesting there, and we'll let you folks know a little bit later what was said there. But Angela, let me share a comment with you from Twitter from Yaninka Aldi. She said Oprah is a terrible interviewer on these things. She throws softballs like 60 Minutes is the MLB. I don't know what that part of it, those statements mean. It was all planned to give him the softest and weakest interviewer who will still be a highly heralded individual. Oprah's interview with Marion Jones years ago was a joke. Do you believe that in the theory that, I believe he has some business relationship with Oprah's network, that this is no accident that Oprah got this interview, or do you believe that Oprah was just the best person for the job? And I don't know what the job is. We really don't know what his intentions are.
Yeah, I don't know what his agenda is. I think she's the best candidate only because he transcended sports. So you're no longer talking about a sports figure. You're talking about a humanitarian, somebody that's just, Bob Costas wouldn't do it. Because
really?
Bob Costas or Rio Sports, they're not going to reach the audience that I think Lance Armstrong accumulated along the way with the Live Strong effort and everything.
So if the most revered broadcast personality at, say, ESPN was to do this, and ABC was to get together and do a mass taping for ESPN, and to do some subsequent airing on ABC networks, you still just think Oprah, just the old factor, is just larger than life with this situation?
Well, maybe not Oprah per se, but definitely not a sports media figure because
Really?
because it's not about sports at this point. Cycling's done.
So who
everything's
outside
done.
of sports cares about Lance Armstrong using steroids?
All the people that feel a little bit embarrassed by being duped, maybe.
But those are, who got duped? The media.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, the media is don't.
The
I mean,
media.
But-
the society didn't really get duped because we desensitized to steroid use by now.
But it's not about steroid use because the people that with the Live Strong effort,
Because
with
of
the
Live
Live Strong,
Strong.
with the Live Strong campaign, I mean, you just can't look at it from a sports perspective. It's bigger than that. It's broader than that. And I think what Oprah does, what she has as a benefit, is that she humanizes people. But I don't know if it really was in his best interest after the interview played out.
Mhm.
But I think going into it, the intention might have been that this is going to be the person that makes me look the best. No, but not because about it being sports or otherwise. I just think that this was the best person suited for what potentially could have been his agenda, which I still have to, which I don't get.
Okay. Hey, I think the O wins. You just can't defeat Oprah. Angelo, appreciate that. Richard Walker, appreciate it. Good comments, guys, on this segment. Well, we went to Facebook with it. We went to Twitter with it. We'll go now to all of social media. It has been heavy. I got two heavyweights with me on the set right now. My man, Will Lyles, Richard Walker. I got an offensive line up here, man. I ran that football. I would just get lost behind these cats and just take it through the A-gap before you know it, I'm headed to the house. Look, folks, we want you to always follow this show on Facebook at Craig Shelton. That's Craig HMW Shelton. Search me out on Facebook. And on Twitter, that's Craig Shelton HMW. It's important that you follow the show because you are part of the show. Social media is you're a huge part of the show. It's where we get the energy from that keeps the vibe going. Richard and I, we always out there trying to make it happen along with the other HMW guys, Angelo and Lamont. So follow this show, follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Guys, let's go here with it today. 8 head coaching vacancies and 7 general manager jobs have been filled in the NFL since the end of the offseason. Not one minority got a job. Not one. Not a single one got a job. Obviously, this has caused a little bit of a stir among folks. It started to get some legs really today nationally. You know, here's when issues of race are starting to get legs is when people start giving statements that don't have no reason to give a statement. You know, like you have nothing to do with this, but it's like I just feel obligated to give a statement because I ain't hired no black folks this week either. But we did get a response around 2 or 3 o'clock this afternoon from the NFL office. They responded with a statement from Robert Gulliver, the league executive vice president of human resources. I want to share his comments with you. While there has been full compliance with the interview requirements of the Rooney Rule, and we wish the new head coaches and general managers much success, the hiring results this year have been unexpected and reflect a disappointing lack of diversity. That's the first half of what Gulliver said in his statement. Let me start with you, Will Lyles, on this one. I guess just give me your brief synopsis, just in general terms, how you feel about what has occurred and your opinion on whether or not the Rooney Rule needs to be tweaked.
Well, I feel that the Rooney Rule, saying that I'm interviewing black coaches or black front office people, that's good and dandy, but if you're not hiring them, what's the point? There's no point in it. So, I mean, it really went back to a good old boy system. It truly has.
Let me ask you this real quick question. If every time there's a hiring session that goes on in the NFL and a minority is not hired in that particular session of hiring, does it mean the entire Rooney Rule concept has not worked? Because we do have examples where it has worked. And just so you people understand, NFL teams have to interview minority candidates per the Rooney Rule, which was designed to make sure that the NFL will give an equal opportunity to minority candidates. But there's a misconception about how this works. Teams can't just go out and hire any upstart black coach. You can't just go hire Kevin Sumlin just because you think he did a good job. Now, obviously, he would be a guy that's eligible, but there's actually a list of names that the NFL provides to teams. And on that list, those players, those coaches are all annotated who are eligible for consideration in the NFL to be hired. So you need to understand that concept before we move on. Well, let me read a little bit more of the statement from Robert Gulliver, the Director of HR at NFL Executive Office. The Rooney Rule has been a valuable tool in expanding diversity, Richard Walker, and inclusion in hiring practices. But there is more work to be done, especially around increasing and strengthening the pipeline of diverse candidates and head coaches and senior football executive positions. A couple of things here, Richard. Folks, think much higher than head coaches, because if you have more general managers that are of color, you're going to have more head coaches of color. Another thing, Richard, I want you to touch on this. Explain to folks the significance in understanding this situation that just occurred. These were all offensive coordinators for the most part. Only one defensive-minded coach was hired out of these group of coaches. No, folks, there are no black offensive coordinators.
Right.
We only got one or two to speak of. Richard?
Well, I think you touched on a very important point, is that there's sort of a caste system, so to speak, where as African Americans, we're obviously welcome to be players. We're welcome to be position coaches, but that's about the ceiling. We don't, as a group, we haven't advanced beyond that. And I think that's one of the things that really needs to be addressed through the Rooney Rule. Unfortunately, it has to happen because we still haven't reached the point where the good old boy system is broken up, and there's true opportunity where these talented individuals who come out and they show they earn the right. We're not talking about, you're entitled to it because of the color of your skin. We're talking about talented coaches who earn the right to be moved into higher positions, moved from quarterback, offensive line, defensive line coach to a coordinator position, and then eventually progress on into a head coach position. The problem is we're not getting that progression. And yeah, you got a few head coaches here and there, and then the other thing that happens is those coaches are under much more scrutiny than their white counterparts. I'm just calling it like it is.
Wait a minute, are you really?
Oh yeah,
you really believe that black coaches are
absolutely
under more scrutiny? Well, what scrutiny has Mike Tomlin been in Pittsburgh that Andy Reid hasn't been in or wasn't in when he was in Philadelphia?
The difference between Mike Tomlin and Andy Reid is that Mike Tomlin actually delivered. Andy Reid never delivered. Mike Tomlin has hardware to back up his performance. Not to mention that this is the first time in, I don't remember, if I recall right, I don't think he's had a losing season under his administration.
I just don't think we have enough. It's not that I don't know if I'm disagreeing with your point in totality. I think my point probably goes more to our core of our argument or discussion is I don't know that we have enough of a sample size.
Right, and
there's only been 17 black NFL coaches in the history
of the game.
Right,
but 90% of players.
4 to 6 of those were interim. They weren't folks that were recruited and hired. I don't know that dynamic is there for that reason, and I just don't know that African American. I guess I haven't had enough examples to dig into that. Was Art Shell, when he was head coach of the Raiders, was he villainized for anything other than the fact that he was the head coach of the Raiders, and anybody that's a Raider is going to be villainized? There's no in between with the Raiders. You either love them or you hate them. I just don't know. If Gary Kubiak in Houston had black skin, would there be any more people saying that Gary Kubiak is too conservative? I don't think so. I just don't think so. But like I say, we might not have enough of a sample size out there.
One of the things I look at is I see the rehiring of Andy Reid and the non-rehiring of
black coaches do not get second chance.
They don't get second chance.
Now that argument
That's the difference.
It's not even an argument.
Right.
That is the difference. And
why is Lovie Smith not coaching one of these?
He should have been in office the next day.
Exactly. And Andy Reid, people like Andy Reid, Ken Wisenhunt, they were sought out. Lovie Smith wasn't. And that's the part that disappoints me more than anything.
Great comments from Richard Walker and Will Lyles. I appreciate you guys' candidness on this sensitive subject, but that's what we do on the cut. We cut them up, we get sensitive with you. We're not R&B singers, but we do have one in the studio tonight behind the camera. We're going to go to social media right now, well, actually, we won't be going to social media on this particular segment. We're going to go ahead and go to a break, and when we get back, we'll have the last segment of this week's episode of The Cut. Folks, welcome back to The Cut. This is the final segment of this week's show, and joining myself along with Will Lyles and Richard Walker, who from H&W have been along with me all through the night, is my man Nate Griffin, Rice Athletics. That's the voice of Rice football right there. And we appreciate you coming in and hang out with us for this final segment.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, you know it's all good, man. We love to have you in studio. Needed that extra guy here, that extra voice, because we're going to finish off the show this week, talk a little bit about the NFC and AFC championship games. Obviously, the 49ers took care of business against Atlanta, and the Ravens got it done over those pesky Patriots who the Texans couldn't handle. But somehow the Ravens made it look not quite so difficult to figure out what was going on with Bill Belichick and that offense and that Patriot defense. And I will go ahead, guys, and start with the 49ers and the Falcons. I'll give each one of you guys to just kind of give me your individual synopsis on how you think things played out and why they played out the way they did. Again, 49ers 28, Falcons 24. 49ers scored 17 unanswered points before, the Atlanta scored 17 unanswered points before the 49ers were able to put 14 points on the board in the second quarter. And I'll tell you what I was thinking at that time. I was thinking to myself, this just doesn't feel like a game that I think Atlanta is going to come out on top in, because this game was starting to take on the profile. If Atlanta had to write or design a profile that they didn't want that game to fall into, we saw it happening when the 49ers came storming back with 14 unanswered points. Well, then Atlanta puts another score on the board, and now you go to halftime, 24-14, and I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe the moment may be a little bit too big for this kid Kaepernick. Boy, was I wrong. Let's go ahead and start with Will.
Well, the 49ers, they were extremely poised throughout the whole game, even after Julio Jones caught the wrong touchdown on the broken coverage.
Right.
The defense still played solid. They stood up. They played better against the run. They set that game was just like the Seattle game. It was a mirror image of the Seattle game. And I saw it and I said, you know what? These guys, when they came storming back with the 14 points, I said they're going to win this game.
Yeah, I sent you a tweet when I saw LaMichael James get that 15-yard touchdown run, because I know that's a kid that you worked a lot with, and I know you had to be proud. Nate, your thoughts?
I think Mike Nolan made some adjustments in the second half to adjust to what Atlanta did in the first half, and we did see a carbon copy of the Seattle game. There's no question about that. Atlanta has had some problems against very stout and physical defenses, particularly in the second half, and it did not fare well for them on Sunday. So that's the way the ball rolls. If you can't score against a defense like that in the second half of the football game, 9 times out of 10, you're going to lose.
And I saw some folks on Twitter and about commenting that, Matty Ice is suddenly taking a page out of Matt Sharp's book. Well, in your opinion, was this a Matty Ice problem, or were they just beaten by a better team?
I think they were beaten by a better team. San Francisco is a very physical team, just like Seattle. We saw the same thing. Seattle has much more physical corners, bigger corners. San Francisco, when you look at their linebackers, they look like guys who were made by God. And there's no question about that. They're just plastered together in all the right places. You look at those guys, you get intimidated. And I think in the second half, they really started to play well, especially after the adjustments that Mike Nolan made. Real
good situation, folks, going into this Super Bowl. You get a changing of the guard as far as the NFL's elite Mike linebacker, with Ray Lewis kind of handing over the torch to Willis. And I'm interested, that's kind of a side story along with the Harbaugh Bowl, two brothers coaching against each other. But for me, when you're talking about X&O football on the field, Richard, for me, it's all about these two linebackers, the present, the future, and the past, on display with these guys. Your thoughts?
Well, I think to your point, obviously the adjustments they made defensively had a significant impact. But my game ball would actually go to that offensive line. But they
Bruising
really,
offensive line.
they won the battle at the line of scrimmage, and they really took over this game. Starting somewhere toward the middle of the second quarter, that second half, they absolutely dominated at the line of scrimmage. The defensive line for Atlanta just couldn't get any type of pressure on Kaepernick whatsoever. They had no response to his arm, which surprised me more so than his leg. I mean, this guy he looked like a kind of Joe Montana-ish, so to speak, out there. So.
With the poise.
With the poise.
Yeah.
I mean, he had no pressure. He could have sat back in a lazy boy and picked the defense apart.
Yeah, interesting that you talk about that offensive line because the 49ers, they may have the best offensive line in football. It's easy to say that when you see teams on the highest stage and want to grade where they're the best at this and the best at that. No, San Francisco really does have a dominating, and they're a big, physical line. They've only got one guy that's in the 300-pound range. All the rest of those guys are notably over 300 pounds. I believe you got one guy maybe 335 or so. Yeah. So they lay on you, and what I noticed is that, and tell me what you think, Nate, Atlanta's front line, and tell me how this may relate against Baltimore with that 3-4 scheme. Atlanta had a lot of trouble shedding blockers at the first level. And I'm sorry, if you're going to allow Gore to get behind that big offensive line, especially going up against a 3-4 defense, and you can't shed blockers and be able to compromise those gaps, it's going to be some issues for you.
Haloti Nana in the middle is a load. And, I tell you what, they have two really good defensive ends as well. But what that does, that allows those linebackers to make plays. I think Ray Lewis is going to have a big day if they run his way.
14 tackles, 6 solo tackles.
There you go. That's what the 3-4 defense is supposed to do. It's supposed to get those linebackers in positions to make plays. But I tell you what, the key is going to be how well the big guy in the middle plays, Haloti Nana.
When you have a big guy like Haloti Nana laying on your center and dominating the A-gap, and then when he goes out and take a breather, you bring in Terrence Cody, wow. that's a lot of football player. Yeah. Let's move on to the Ravens and Patriots. I want to pat myself on the back on this one. I felt all along, I told folks, what's going to really make people in Houston feel bad about the Texans when the Patriots beat up on them, and they did that, is that this is not a great Patriot football team. And you're going to feel foolish when you're sitting home and you watch other teams, probably the Ravens was the team I said. I just didn't buy Denver. I figured that Peyton Manning would find a way not to win. But I just know that this particular Patriot team was not a great football team. Belichick is an awesome coach. Awesome coach. And if you Gary Kubiak and the Texans and you're sitting home right now, well, you are sitting home right now, and you watch how, it's not the fact that the Ravens found a way to beat New England in New England, it's how easy they made it look. The Texans couldn't figure out where to line up early in the football game. If you notice on defense, the Ravens didn't move around a lot. They got set, and they said, here we come. Deal with it. Now, with that philosophy of football, will work against a system that's got a kid at 6'5" that can run a 4.3. That was his fastest time he's ever been timed in Kaepernick.
Well, I think one of the things that will hurt the Ravens is that they won't be able to play as much man against Kaepernick because they're going to try to spy him. They're going to have to spy him.
Just like Atlanta did. Yeah.
Just like Atlanta did. So what that did was that took another person out of that zone, which you spying Kaepernick, and he picked them apart.
No doubt.
He picked them apart. So I feel that threat to run is going to be a very dominating factor in the game because he can beat you not only with his legs, but he can beat you with his arm.
But you look at the Baltimore-New England time of possession, 31 minutes as opposed to 28, 54, almost 29 minutes. The 49ers were able to dominate at the line of scrimmage against Atlanta, but they lost the time of possession battle. I think because of these two teams are so physical and they both like to play between the tackles on offense and take their chances downfield, they both would do that. And, of course, the 49ers will have that extra added punch of Kaepernick and what he can do on the ground. But how important, Nate, do you think time of possession in this particular matchup will be in the Super Bowl?
Well, let's not discount the fact that they have two great running backs in Frank Gore and LaMichael James. LaMichael James, again, the change of pace running back. Frank Gore is your in-between the tackle guy. He's your gap guy when you need that extra 1 or 2 yards, the really tough yards. That's what you get from him. And you talked about the big offensive line that leaned on Atlanta. That was a problem for them.
Yeah,
I think
it
that's
really
going to be
was.
a problem for Baltimore as well. But again, I think that they match up a little bit better than a team like Atlanta because they're lighter up front. And then you talked about bringing in big Terrence Cody out of Alabama. That's going to be a big factor for the Baltimore Ravens. So look for them to do that. But the change of pace back in LaMichael James, 2 questions. Is he going to be able to really skirt outside? Because Baltimore can cover those edges. They do a good job of edge penetration. They can do that very, very well. So that's going to be a good question, a big question for them, as well as will they be able to run against Baltimore?
Yeah, Ravens are super athletic. You got the just ageless performance with Ray Lewis, and then a guy like Suggs that's just so dynamic. Excuse me. We're going to close it out right here. And Richard, I'll give you like about 30 seconds to tell me what the X factor is in this matchup with the 49ers and the Ravens, 2 very similar teams in regard to their physicality.
I think the X factor for this game is going to be how the secondary responds to both of these respective quarterbacks. For the 49ers, it's going to be interesting to see how well they match up with those huge receivers that the Ravens have. And Joe Flacco he doesn't get a lot of credit for it, but the guy has no problem with getting the ball down the field. So it'll be interesting to see, how effective he is at stretching the field, which obviously will take pressure off him and create some problems with those matchups if they can. On the other hand, I want to see how well the defensive backfield of the Ravens does in disguising coverage with Colin Kaepernick. Because kind of to Will's point earlier, you're not going to be able to run a whole lot of men, so you got to be creative with your coverages and try to confuse the kid. I think that's the only way that you can stop him. I don't think you can plan on using your physicality to try to slow him down because he can just always tuck the ball and run. But you try to confuse him, try to get him to make some mistakes, put him in a situation where he's behind on the scoreboard and you limit their playbook. I think that's the best way to game plan for him.